water. I was debating. I think we're good. I think they're going to get it. Although this is probably the one we probably want a video. Is it going? Oh, okay. Never mind. All right. So another course that I like to suggest out after you get through open water, perfect buoyancy. And what we'll do in perfect buoyancy is we'll spend a couple hours in the pool. I like to do it over multiple sessions. I also think you're going to get it in one session. I'll give you a good idea of buoyancy, but what perfect buoyancy really does, it's going to look something like this. Let's see. Grab my marker again. So what you're going to find is my goal is to get you to the point where you look like this as a diver. I'm an artist, by the way. This is actually professional art right here, right? So my overall goal is to get you like to where you look like this. Now, what I'll do is we'll practice this position, but we'll start talking about, should I have a weight here? Should I have a weight here? As I'm looking at the top of you, your head, that's your arms, that's your feet, right? We'll talk about, should I put them like this? Should I put more over here? Should I put more over there? So literally what we'll do is we'll treat you like a balance point, and we'll figure out what your balance point is so that you're in that good diver position. We'll also talk about breathing, how to breathe your way through situations, and we'll practice that as well. We'll practice some finning techniques. It's just a good overall course to make sure that you're just that much safer of a diver. So we talked about a little bit what kind of David went through. Specialty divers is 2 specialty programs, 12 log dives, 4 specialty programs, and 24 log dives to become an advanced diver. Master diver is 4 specialty programs, 50 log dives, and stress and rescue. By the way, stress and rescue is a really fun course for me. I don't know about you, but I enjoy it. My goal is, so there's different ways to run stress and rescue, and I'll just tell you right now that David's been through 2 instructors on this, and we have one instructor that will stress you out. He will stress you out. I do not work on stressing you out. I let the situation stress you out. I am your savior. And as you guys will see, David, you ever heard me yell or yell at people? Just not my thing. I don't like to yell and get mad or sound like I'm mad at you. I want you guys to always feel like you can come to me, or I'll be the one to help you out. So I'll definitely get you stressed out, but it won't be at me. It'll be through the situation. Good course. And again, if you get through Master Diver by the end of the year, last year was aggressor did Turks and Caicos on an aggressor too. So that's the boat that you spend all day, 7 days on a aggressor. So it's pretty cool. Other cool courses. There's a ton of neat courses out there. We're talking about nitrox. I encourage you guys strongly to sign up for that. Navigation's a lot of fun. Being able to figure your way out from point A to point B. Deep diving. If I were to take and put together 3 courses for every diver, the first one would always be nitrox. The second one would be deep diving, and the third one would always be night and limited viz. That will cover about 95% of the type of diving that you'll probably want to do. Nitrox to make you safer. Deep diving will get you down past that 60-foot mark to the 130-foot mark. There's some cool stuff deep. And night and limited viz will teach you how to deal with doing night dives. And night dives are some of my favorite dives in the world. One of my favorite dives, we were diving in Roatan, and we did a night dive, and we're coming along. Nick and I have a red light on our flashlights, and we found this lobster. It was probably this big. It had big antenna. We came up behind him, and it was fun because you flick one of his antenna, and then he'd go, and he couldn't see you. And he started singing. He kind of touched his other little antenna. And he would stop and try to figure out what was going on. And then that's usually when we've seen octopus out and about doing their thing. I've seen squid at night. The biggest squid I saw was probably this big. It was pretty neat. I was doing a shore dive in Maui, and probably 30 feet, and we came up to this big reef and found this really beautiful maroon squid. He's kind of just hanging right there. He's not really going anywhere. After about 2 or 3 minutes, I was with my buddy, and I was pretty much done seeing the squid. I want to see other stuff, and so I went around the reef because it was just a big square reef, and came back around. There's really pretty royal blue squid. I was like, wow, what are the odds? Seeing one squid on a dive is a big deal, especially that big. Seeing 2, that's phenomenal. And I looked at it and I'm like, He's like, it changed colors. So those are the ones that I like, that I think every diver should consider. Nitrox for safety, deep dive to get you deeper, night and limited vis, so you can do those night dives. Perfect Buoyancy is a great course. Stretch and rescues, tons of fun for me, and it comes with React Right. I like science and I like physics. And David will tell you that I love teaching the science diving course. It's a non-diving course, but I have a hard time teaching it in 3 to 4 sessions, because there's so much to go over and it's so cool. And I really take a lot of pride in breaking down complex situations, in diving, into complex physics, and into simpler ways and simpler things, so that you.
I believe the term is geeking out.
I do definitely nerd out on it, but I believe firmly that if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it yourself. So not only will I explain it simply, but I'll explain it in the whys, because for me, I have to understand the why of something. Wreck diving is definitely a lot of fun. I teach wreck and advanced wreck, so you guys understand how to safely, dive a wreck. And the recreational side mount is definitely near and dear to my heart. If I'm not diving with students, then I only dive side mount. Other cool courses, there's a ton of ecology courses out there. For the love of God, don't ever pay somebody to take these courses. Just don't do it. I became an instructor of them so I could talk to you guys on the boat and make your boat rides better. But don't pay somebody for those. You can find just about as much on YouTube. They're cool courses to take. It was even cooler becoming an instructor because the instructor trainer was really neat. But wave tides and currents are pretty cool. Photo video is a fun course to take. It's a lot of perfect buoyancy. And then if you're under 10, explorers programs is a lot of fun as well. Started getting the advanced courses. I teach dry suit. I like to stay warm. I do not like to be cold. Ice diving aside, and being the ice diving instructor for Southeast Idaho, I don't like being cold. So I drive a dry suit. Full face mask is a lot of fun. It's cool that, with a full face mask, you get comms, and Nikki and I can talk to each other while we dive. Definitely a fun way to go. Obviously, we talked about ice diving to an nth degree. I also teach altitude diving. If you're diving anywhere that's over 1,000 feet, taking the altitude course is definitely to your advantage. I've got one coming up on Friday. When you guys get down the road, you've got more than 50 dives, you can get into independent diving, or solo diving. It's a lot of fun. I have a fun time teaching the course, and my students learn a lot. So what that means is I let you guys get stressed out a lot, and I have fun doing it. So, and then if you really want to continue down that path, extended range nitrox, extended range foundations, side mount, decompression diving, extended range, and advanced rec are a lot of fun. What this basically does is takes the limits that we're placing on you during this diving, we wad them up in a little ball, and we throw them away, and we teach you how to work outside the box. I enjoy it thoroughly. And again, everything's done on a mentorship program. All right. The purpose of a BC. Unfortunately, we haven't gone through an actual session yet with this, but we kind of talked about it. The purpose of a BC is what? What do you guys think?
All of the above.
All the above is exactly right. It's going to help you ascend and descend rates. It'll slow you down. It's like a balloon, right? Or a parachute. Provide flotation at the surface and maintain neutral buoyancy, because as you get down, you don't want to crash into things. The easiest way to keep from crashing into things is add just a little air. That might be a test question. The 3 basic rules of Scuba stated in the proper order are, importance are,
D.
Everything D? D is exactly right. Good job, guys. The basic rules of Scuba, just going to go over them again. Breathe continuously. Now, just so you know, I have to say this 48 times through the course, so now I've got it 3 times down, so only 45 left to go. Second rule of Scuba is essentially maintain control. Third is never dive alone or beyond your ability, your training, or your comfort level. So the concept of buoyancy. David, you want to step in and do the concept of buoyancy in Archimedes? I made you do it once.
Yes, you did.
I'm just going to look ahead on the slide and see. Okay. So, everybody's heard the term buoyancy. Anybody know what it means?
Water displacement.
Did you have something?
No.
No? You like that one? So water displacement is a really good way to look at it. They call it the Archimedes principle because he is the one who correlated buoyancy by using water displacement. He was contracted to verify a king's crown. Artist was hired to make a crown out of a certain amount of gold, and obviously when things are very intricately shaped, it's hard to say how much gold that is. And so the king came and he's like, hey, I feel like I'm getting ripped off. Turns out he was. Too bad, so sad for the artist. But excellent for us as divers. So there's three types of buoyancy. Any guesses? Neutral. Have you done this before? No? Did you go through the class already? No? All right. Well, you're good at this. So positive, negative, and neutral. What do we want to be when we're in the water? Neutral. Why? Exactly. When you're neutral, you stay where you're at. If you're positive, as soon as you quit paying attention, you're going to float to the surface. If you're negative, as soon as you quit paying attention, you're going to hit the ground. If you're as negative as he is when he dives, you're going to hit the ground no matter what you do. So the weight of air in water, absolute versus gauge pressure. The water weighs, fresh water weighs 62.4 pounds per cubic foot. Is that right? Water? Okay. Or is that the displacement? 62.4. And then salt water is 64 pounds, almost exactly. So you'll be a little more buoyant in salt water than fresh. So that is something to accommodate. We're going to be doing buoyancy tests in the pool. If you go dive in the ocean, you will probably need more weight than you're set up with here. So just keep that in mind. And then absolute versus gauge pressure. I think that's on the next slide, relates to the atmospheric pressure of the air. So when we're at the surface, we have one entire atmosphere of air crushing down on us. We just never notice it because that's what we're used to, right? You said you were camping. I assume you hiked too. Up at the top of the mountain, you feel different considerably.
Yeah.
And the same thing when we're going up in airplanes, when we're going down to sea level, all of those airs are going to change. When we're in the water, it's going to change as well. So we hit an entire second atmosphere by the time we hit 33 feet of seawater. I believe this is in salt water, which is why the numbers are different. But the numbers that you need to know are 33, 66, and 99 feet. Because at 33, 66, and 99 feet, you hit an entire another atmosphere. So in your first 33 feet of descent, you have the most change that you will experience in that bubble, because that's where you get the most, or I guess the most dramatic change. I won't say the most change. And then as you hit 66 feet, you'll have 3 atmospheres, and if you ever get deep diving certified, you can have 4, 5, 6, as many atmospheres as you can certify for. What that means is, for you guys, you especially need to pay attention to your ascent rate in the first 33 feet. A lot of people get complacent. They're like, oh, whatever, I'm not that deep. It's like he was saying, you can get decompression sickness in the pool. Like 12 feet of water is enough to get decompression sickness if you do it, if you do an unsafe ascent. So during all of our training dives, I think the deepest you can get at Belmont is about 28 to 30 feet, depending on how close you're willing to get into the mud. So when you're diving, make sure that you don't get complacent and that you are paying attention to your ascent rates and descent rates. Descent rates, not as big of a deal. You'll just overpressure and you'll be uncomfortable. Ascent rates, it's kind of like opening a shaken soda. Your gas bubbles in your blood can depressurize rapidly and they'll kind of fizz out.
So overall, as we're looking at this, it says 34 feet, right? Is that freshwater or seawater? Sure.
I might have gotten them back.
Freshwater. So
Okay.
34 feet freshwater, 33 feet seawater are your atmospheric differentiations. The reason being is salt water is heavier. So as we start dealing with this, we just need to be aware that salt water is going to be heavier, it's going to be denser, and it's going to cause a greater atmospheric change more quickly. The other thing to be aware of is as you're diving at altitude, the same thing. The higher the altitude, the shallower you have to go to get the same amount of depth. For example, at Ryrie Reservoir, if we dive to 100 feet, that's equal to a 118-foot dive because of the additional atmospheric pressure. So be aware of that. Atmospheric pressure is what we're breathing. It's what we have all around us. Gauge pressure is atmospheric pressure plus the plus one, plus the actual pressure around us as well. So let's just kind of back up a little bit. So if we have 1 cubic foot of air at the surface, oh, it does. Yeah. So we have 1 cubic foot of air at the surface, and we know we have a 2 atmospheric change or 50% change. How many cubic feet of air do we have at 33 feet or 34 feet freshwater? Half. We have a 50% change overall. So absolute pressure is defined as what? Anybody else want to take it? It is B. Absolute pressure is the total pressure exerted on an object around us. Gauge pressure is absolute pressure plus 1 because we have an additional pressure working on. So the effects of pressure on the water, we start dealing with Boyle's law. Boyle was an interesting guy. He was in the Scottish guy in the 16th century, and he was experimenting along with snakes in a sealed vacuum chamber underwater. And he realized as he pulled this snake out, he was throwing them in pretty deep water, 400, 500 feet. When he pulled it out too quickly, he noticed that one of the snakes started to bleed a blood, or cried a tear of blood. He theorized that as pressure increases, volume decreases. As pressure decreases, volume increases. So as we go to 1 bar, which is where we're at, pressure is 14.7 psi, 1 atmosphere. When we go down to 33 feet seawater, 34 feet fresh water, we have twice as much pressure exerted on our object. So we take that 1 cubic foot balloon and it's literally half the size. Now the bad news for you guys is we're working in the greatest pressure differentiation change you're going to deal with. You're going to deal with a lot of pressure change because we're dealing with that first 33 feet. The good news is as you get more certified and you start going deeper, you have a slower gradation change. Remember, the gradation change of pressure is algorithmic, not linear. So instead of like my drawings, instead of it going literally like this, it literally looks more like this. It gets greater and lesser and lesser and lesser the deeper we go. Okay, so we have a lower gradation change as we get deeper. So I feel like Three Stooges there. So as we go to 33 feet, 1 cubic foot is equal to half of that, a third, a quarter, an eighth, a 16th, a 32nd, and so on. Pressure gradation changes. Now, why is that important? Part of it. Ding, 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 ding. That's the bigger part. So this is an 80 cubic foot tank. It means if I uncompress this and we were to measure the amount of volume that's in this, we have 80 cubic feet, or about the size of a phone booth. You're kind of young, so you probably don't know what a phone booth is. You're probably like,
I know what a phone booth is.
So about the size of a phone booth is about 80 cubic feet. So I've got enough air in this to fill a foam booth. Now, here's where this gets important. At 33 feet, I have half of that. So this is equal to 40 cubic feet of air at 33 feet. It's equal to about 20 cubic feet of air at 66 feet. Okay. Now, if I'm at 66 feet diving, do the size of my lungs change? What are your thoughts? Okay. How about you? What do you think?
I mean, yeah, the volume that your lungs can hold is less, isn't it?
So, have you ever seen your hands shrink in the water? Why would your lungs shrink? They hold about 2 liters of air, roughly. If you're a girl, about 1.6. If you're a guy, about 1.9, truthfully. So the size of your lungs don't change, but the amount of air condensed does. So it's a lot denser that's going to be in your air, in your lungs. So I'm still trying to fill 2 liters, basically, of air. If I only have 40 cubic feet left in here at 33 feet, 30 cubic feet at 66 feet, 20 cubic feet at 99 feet, does my tank last longer or less? Shorter? Absolutely. Absolutely, because I'm still filling up the same amount of space. I've got still 2 liters to fill up, but now I have substantially less volume for my tank because of the compression of the air. It's literally the same amount of stuff, same amount of size, but now it's twice the amount of molecules inside that, or 3 times or 4 times the size of the molecules in that. Now, interesting enough, just for your trivia fact for the day, about 9 years later, another guy in France discovered the same basic idea. His name was Marriott, Edmund Marriott. He was a Catholic priest and a scientist as well, and started the French Scientific League, basically. Interesting guy. He experimented on plants, but he discovered one other key piece of this. Kind of a duh moment, right? At a constant temperature. So we all know that if you heat up a bottle, it's going to expand. So all this is based on the idea that as pressure increases, volume decreases at a constant temperature. As pressure decreases, volume increases at a constant temperature. So now where is that important? Absolutely. So I'm sitting on a dive boat, and in the bright hot sun in Florida, and it's 105 degrees and about 4,000% humidity, and I jump in the nice water. What's going to happen to my tank? It's going to cool, right? So I'm going to have less gas in it. Perfect example. I started off with a tank in the warmth of my house on Saturday morning, had 3,200 cubic or psi in it. When I got into the 39-degree water, I suddenly had 29 psi, 2,900 psi. So, at a cost.
Where does it tell you that?
On the gauge, how much pressure you have?
Yeah. Is it on your suit? Is it on the tank?
Depends on what you're using, but
So you're talking about the.
so there's your psi. So it's reads 0 because it's not hooked up to anything. But I also have AI as well that will read that as well. So you'll read it when I checked it before we left the house to make sure that I had pressure in my tank. And then when I got in the water, I saw it. What's fun is Belmont. I usually leave the tanks in the back of my truck. It's usually negative 10 degrees wind chill factor on the way down there. It sucks them down, and as soon as I turn them on, they're 2,900 psi. For the first few minutes of my dive, I like to jump in and dive immediately because for the first few minutes of my dive, I have a negative sac rate instead of a positive sac rate. The pressure of my tank is increasing faster than I can breathe it off. So for the first 4 or 5 minutes, it'll start at 2,900 psi, and I can do a 5-minute dive, and it'll end at 3,100 psi. So it gains in pressure. Kind of a fun thing. All right. An object immersed in water will be buoyed up by a force that is blank the weight of the water it displaces. Greater than, equal to, less than, or 2 times.
Well, I mean, I guess.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think if it was lighter than water, I guess I don't know. That or the factor.
What do you think, Caleb? What do you think? It's gonna be equal to. Okay, this is Archimedes. Archimedes was an interesting guy, right? He was a scientist, philosopher, theologian, many, many, many things. And one day, the king came to good old Archimedes and he said, "Hey, I think the goldsmith ripped me off. He made this crown. I gave him a pound of gold. I don't think there's a pound of gold in my crown. Can you figure it out if he cheated me?" And Archimedes, very bold young man, well, middle-aged man at this point, said, "I can figure it out." And he took the crown and the equal amount of gold, went home, and said, "How am I going to figure this out?" And had no idea. So one day Archimedes is sitting in his hot tub and noticed that as he got his big fat body into the hot tub, it was buoyed up by an equal amount of what it was displaced. So if I put a 1 cubic foot idea, something in the water, I'm going to buoy up by 1 cubic foot, right? An equal amount. Now, bad news for the goldsmith. After he figured this out, he was able to submerge the crown into water, and it buoyed up a specific amount based upon the density and what is buoyed. He then measured out and figured out that the goldsmith had cheated him. Bad news for the goldsmith. Off with your head. I don't know that actually that happened, but it was bad news for the goldsmith because he'd ripped off the king. And in that time and period, I can't imagine that was a really great thing to happen, to try and steal from the king. So the answer to this, Archimedes tells us, is an object immersed in water will be buoyed up by a force that is equal to the weight of the water it displaces. Equal to is our magic answer. That might be a test question. All right. Panic can be prevented by all of them. Yeah, absolutely. Taking specialty classes, getting more knowledge, right? Honestly evaluating your diving skills. Don't get in situations that are above your head. Properly maintaining your diving system so it doesn't fail on you. Good job. Use of the My SSI logbook is important because all of them. We're going to make sure that you're going to fill out a medical waiver in there that says you're fit to dive. It's going to have information about future dives, resource for future dives, because it'll have past information. It keeps an accurate record of your personal information as well. So the effects of pressure underwater. This is our scary time. I'm going to scare you guys for a minute. I'm sorry. I'm going to give you about another half hour, if that's okay with you guys, and then we'll call it. If it sounded good, perfect. So the effects of pressure underwater. Pressure-related diving injuries are tear gas embolism, metastymal emphysema, subcutaneous emphysema, and pneumothorax. Sorry. You have to practice saying those over and over again. The basic respiratory system. As we breathe, it goes down the trachea, into the lungs, through the alveoli, and then it's distributed through the circulatory system and diffused into the tissues. Okay? Makes sense? We've all seen this. As the carbon dioxide is expelled and used, it comes back to the circulatory system. Heart pumps it. It goes into the respiratory system and out to the alveoli, and it's exhaled. Simple enough. Basically. Now, how many of these little alveoli do we think we have in our lungs? What do you think?
Probably in the thousands.
300 million. If 300 million of these little sacs. Now, there's definitely different types of respiratory ailments that cause those to get hard and not be able to function properly, but hopefully you've taken a physical or you're aware and you don't have any of that. But these little alveoli, their whole job is to process oxygen into the bloodstream and process carbon dioxide out of the circulatory system. So the effects of pressure underwater, we have the problem. The biggest problem is overexpansion injuries. These all happen basically if you hold your breath. Now, arterial gas embolism is the worst of the three of them. What that basically means is that as I held my breath, that it caused bubbles into my arterial gas network. This is bad. This doesn't sound like a good thing, right? The problem is most times you're going to be pumping and you're going to be in a vertical position. Those gas bubbles can go up through the venous system and into the heart, causing the heart to stop. They can go into different parts of your shoulders, causing restricted blood flow. They can go into your neck. They can go up the venous system into your brain, causing it to stop and have problems. Now, typically an AGE presents with distorted vision, vertigo, nausea, loss of vision, inability to walk correctly, slurred speech. Any of those, definitely bad. Okay. Metacymal emphysema, same basic idea. When the air is, when you hold your breath, the air will get chest caught into the, out of the lungs, pushed out of the lungs, tearing the lungs and going into the metastyle cavity. Okay. As those air bubbles get bigger, they can press against the lung, causing you not to be able to breathe. Press against the heart, causing you not to function. Press against the venous system, causing blood to stop being able to pump. Very bad stuff. Subcutaneous emphysema generally presents in the neck and the face, and it's when bubbles start going under the skin and puffing up and causing puffus. Again, it generally presents in the neck and the face. Subcutaneous emphysema can actually cause a complete push of the lung structure over as well. Neothorax is when it gets caught in the neck, and it actually can cause you to block the trachea as well. Again, always breathe. All right, overexpansion injuries can be prevented by
All of them.
it is all of them. Dive with a properly maintained system, learn to do the correct breathing in the pool, and never hold your breath. Now, overexpansion injuries, the book will tell you that all overexpansion injuries in DCS should be treated with oxygen. And in your case, since you are not a medical provider, you want to put them on oxygen and immediately seek medical help. The problem is there's a fair amount of those that honestly, subcutaneous emphysema, neothorax, and metacymal emphysema, putting somebody on pure oxygen will do very little for them. Other remedies must be attempted and helped by a certified EMT or above. The most serious lung expansion injury is, we talked about at the very beginning, the arterial gas embolism. Now, decompression sickness. We got the idea of where decompression sickness came from, and we originally called it the caissons disease. And where we got that from is when they were building the Brooklyn Bridge, they used to send divers down to work on the base of the bridge in these big bells, and they called them caissons. They would work them for, this is 1800, so they work them for 12, 14, 16, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week kind of deal. And what they discovered is they'd pull them back up, they get to the surface, and all of a sudden they would be in extreme pain, joint pain. They would get to the point where they were in such pain that they would bend over. Thus the term, the bends, because they would literally bend over and double over in pain. Now, what is causing this is a high partial pressure of nitrogen. Now, remember we talked earlier that the idea of pressure affects the density of the gas, right? Make sense? So all of a sudden, in a 1 cubic foot space, we now have the equivalent of 2 cubic feet of air. We've compressed it all into the same space, right? Well, what that happens, according to Henry, is that it also compresses the gas to a point where it becomes a higher partial pressure of whatever we're breathing. Now, currently, we're breathing air, which is 79% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, right? Or thereabouts. It's 20.9 with 0.1% being other things like argon and xenon and radon and all the dons out there that we don't like, right? So but for serious of our point of argue, we're going to say 21 and 79 for easy math. Now, as we get deeper, what we're going to find is that that same amount of air is going to be twice as much. So if we get to 2 bar, which is 33 feet, 79% nitrogen now becomes 158% nitrogen. 21% oxygen now becomes 42% oxygen. Nikki, I think she wants to go out. So if we're breathing 42% oxygen, remember we talked about way earlier that your body is a mass of equilibrium, right? It wants to be equal with that around us. So what ends up happening is There's a scientist in the 50s. His name was Bowman. He worked on somebody previous to him called Workman, and they determined that there's about 16 tissue compartments, theoretical compartments in our body, from fast to slow tissue. And just like it sounds, fast tissue uptakes nitrogen faster than slow tissue. Fast tissue being like your brainstem, your spinal cord, your brain. Slow tissue being things like fat and bone, where it takes a longer time for it to saturate, for it to get through. Think about different sizes of sieves, like you have a coarse sieve and a fine sieve, right? Same basic idea. So what ends up happening is as you're at that 33 feet, your body is perfusing, more accurately, with a higher partial pressure of nitrogen and oxygen. Okay? So now at 33 feet, now we're suddenly at 158%. And as it starts to perfuse with that 158%, it becomes equal to the surroundings, what's going on around it. Now, as you start to come up, it has to go back down from 158% to that 79%. Now, how it comes out is in the form of bubbles. What diving really is the management of bubbles in your circulatory system from your tissue. That's really what diving is about. What I'm teaching you is how to manage the size of the bubbles. Now, it's going to come out in what we call it as bubble seeds. They're very small. They haven't sprouted to become anything bad yet. If we come up slowly enough, it doesn't become a problem. But like the Coke bottle analogy, if I take a Coke, shake the crap out of it, and I pull the top off really quick, nitrogen comes out really quick in the form of bubbles. It becomes bad. If it comes out too fast and those bubbles get too large, those bubble seeds become actual bubbles past the point of just being silent bubbles. Then we start heading to something called the bends. And there's 3 levels of the bends. There's stage 1 called the skin bends. And what it literally is you'll see rashes. It's where the small nitrogen bubbles are small enough that they're trying to escape via the skin bends. So if you get a rash after a dive, there's a good chance you have the bends. Level 2 is when those bubbles become large enough, they start getting trapped in places. They can't come out of the skin, so they'll start getting trapped in your joints. Joint pain, fatigue, things like that. Level 2. Level 3 is when it starts becoming large enough that it's going to start blocking different arteries and different things in your body. You start having numbness in your extremities. You start having vertigo, disorientation, nausea, anything like that. Good chance you might have the bends, right? Okay, make sense? Questions? The good news is with the bends is it's easily avoidable. Simply enough, ascend slowly. Do your safety stops. We're going to talk about safety stops here in a little bit. Take the time to let that go off. Spend a little time in the water. Let it, we call it just doing a floating decompression or a body decompression, right? Take the time. If you do get the bends or you come up too quickly, go on pure oxygen. It'll flush the nitrogen out a lot faster and go to a recompression chamber. Now, the good news is with all those, the arterial gas embolism, subcutaneous emphysema, all of that, that if you can get to medical treatment and into a chamber within 4.5 hours, you have a 98% chance of 100% recovery. Pretty good? Now, here's my pitch for nitrox. You might have noticed on my slide here that I have one that says EAN 21, and one of them that says EAN 32. EAN 32 is nitrox, and that's where we use a higher partial pressure of oxygen, which means if I have higher percentage of oxygen, I have a lower percentage of nitrogen, right? Simple enough? Common sense. Now, because I have less nitrogen to start with, when I get down to 33 feet, I have less nitrogen in the breathing gas as well. So instead of having 158%, now I only have 136% nitrogen that's perfusing in. So if I have less nitrogen in my system, I have less nitrogen come out of my system, right? And that's what this is management of nitrogen and management of bubbles in your system. That's what this whole thing's about. So that's what, sorry, she's not supposed to jump. That's what this process is how do we manage the nitrogen in our system and manage the bubbles during diving. And that's my pitch for nitrox is right here. You're breathing a lower percentage of nitrogen. You're safer. Now, quiz time. In the air, 1 atmosphere, the partial pressure of nitrogen is, and the partial pressure of oxygen is what? A is exactly right. Good job. The most efficient breathing pattern for scuba diving is? B is exactly right. Good job, guys. You said it with such distinction and power. I felt I was moved. I really was. All right, decompression sickness, and here's how we determine it. So, in the early 1900s, Haldane came across, and he was a brilliant physicist, and he came across with this idea that overall, the way to avoid decompression sickness, or where we get that point where it becomes a concern, is a 2-to-1 ratio, where we get to the point where the pressure is twice the ambient pressure. Simple enough, 33 feet, right? Makes sense? Well, Workman came along, and Workman said, wait a minute. You're on the right track, dude, but you kind of missed the point. So he came up with Workman's critical difference, and this is where we get the idea of nitrox. And he said that you have to be twice the ATA of 79%, or 158% atmospheric pressure of nitrogen, partial pressure of nitrogen. Partial pressure of nitrogen. So, to get to the point where decompression sickness becomes a problem, you have to be breathing over 158%. Now let's just go back for a second. As you can see with nitrox, at 33 feet, I'm only at 136%. I can go much deeper. Not much deeper, but I can go deeper to get to that point. So I can stay longer, I'm safer, and I haven't hit Workman's critical difference at 33 feet at 33% nitrox. Now, interesting enough, Bullman came out and came up with the idea that Workman was slightly off as well. So Workman has been discontinued, but the basic premise is still valid. So decompression sickness, signs and symptoms, pain in the joints. One of the things that happens, anybody ever have a cold? What happens when you get cold? You get sore, lethargic, achy. Why do you think that is? Why do you think your muscles get achy? Some of it. You're on the right track. You're close. What's happening in your body? The white blood vessels cells are going out and doing something. They're attacking something. A little war going on. So what's happening is you've got these white blood vessels, white blood cells. And what they do is they go along and they look for things to be normal and things to be non-normal. If they find something that's not supposed to be there, they attack and they have their little war. They fight it out. Well, if you have bubbles in your system, your white blood cells say, whoa, it's on now, dude, and on like Donkey Kong, and they go to war, just like they do with an illness or sickness that's going on in your body. So that's if you have achy joints, achy muscles, tiredness, that could definitely be a sign of being having a DCS. In fact, it's more common than you might realize to come off a bunch of dives and be tired and achy. You're probably lightly DCS. That's where you want to make sure you're taking that time to do those good safety stops, that good slow ascent. Easy enough. Pain in the joints, loss of vision, narrowed vision, right? Convulsions. Any of those could be definitely signs. Now, easy enough, the treatment for decompression sickness is very easy. Throw them on pure oxygen. Good news is when we go diving together in the back of my truck, I'll show you. I have a first aid kit. It's about this big by this big by this big. I have 2 bottles of air. I've got enough for 2 divers for an hour each, or 1 diver for 2 hours. I will get you to a chamber. There are 8 chambers here in Idaho Falls, and I'll get you to one of them. Okay. Now it's to your advantage to have Dan Insurance. Dan Insurance is for Nikki and I was like $400 for the year. A trip in a chamber. And a chamber is going to run you about 10 grand. If we have to call in life flight, that's going to be another 20 grand. Plus the $200 aspirins and $500 tongue depressors, right? So all in all, to get you to a chamber, good news is I won't charge you for the auction or my ride in my truck, but I promise you the hospital will. So you probably, when all said and done, be about 25 grand. I had a friend that went to the hospital that had to have a piece of ham pulled out of her throat. That was $17,000. She was in the hospital for 4 hours, and they did an oral scope. They numbed her, scoped her down, pulled it out, gave her some aspirin. $17,000. Dan will cover all of that, every bit of it. In fact, we know somebody that had their family member pass away in Roatan. Dan paid for her son to fly down to the mainland and put him up for a week while they processed her body. Paid for her trip, the bodies to be flown back to the United States, to the funeral home here. Dan is pretty amazing. Which of the following would be inappropriate treatment for a diver exhibiting symptoms of decompression sickness? Exactly. Good job. The idea is if you're having a point where you could go into respiratory arrest, convulsions, sickness, do I really want to take you underwater and potentially turn you into a drowning victim too? Probably not the best idea, best plan. Proper ascent techniques. So this is important. As we're getting ready to come up, simply enough, what I do is I'm going to go to my dive buddy. Okay, go up. Fantastic. We're going to go ahead and signal that out. We're going to go and let a little air out of our BC. Okay, we don't want to become positively buoyant. We have 1 cubic foot of air at 66 feet. How many cubic feet of air will that be at the surface? 3 is exactly right. Now, if I have 1 cubic foot of air that's balancing me perfectly at 66 feet, 2 cubic feet of air is going to make me go pretty fast. 3 cubic feet, I'm a Triton missile. I'm going to let a little air out, and I'm going to start a gentle finning to the surface. I'm going to make sure I have my inflator that I can control it in my hand. I'm going to make sure I've got good eyes with my buddy. We're going to head up. We're going to fin to the surface, right? Once we get to 15 feet, making sure we're keeping an eye on our ascent gauge, no faster than 30 feet per minute, we're going to get to our safety stop. Okay? We'll talk about safety stops next week. The last one, my favorite, is nitrogen narcosis. Nitrogen narcosis is often called the mistress of the deep. It is when you get to too high a partial pressure of nitrogen and it becomes narcotic. I happen to have a video on this one that I really like. Lucky for you guys. Be right back.
Do some stupid stuff. Most people don't even know they're not. So it can be useful. Look after them. But hi, I'm Mark, and here are 5 ways you're effectively drugged by the gas that you are breathing the deep. Such you're in the distance. As we all know, we are all narcissists at heart when we lose our inhibition. Let's face it, I'll bet you anything. Social media picture is you Scuba. Not men and women are like that. Who love shiny. When they look at you, they're probably not. You find them buddy breathing. This is the other. Smart individuals will their lack of breathing. They've spent a lot of time learning how important they are and to always keep breathing. What have you seen in the wild from the rare underwater species Homo narcosis? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching. We are in dive store, serving the UK and the world for all the
Fun video. I like Mark. He's a funny guy. So overall, nitrogen narcosis is when we get too high a partial pressure. It acts like a narcotic effect. We've heard stories of there was a diver out on one of the trips. She was down laughing hysterically. You can hear her laughing. And she was doing this. They finally pulled her up and asked her, "The hell were you doing?" And she says, "I was parting the ocean so I could see the mermaids." A really meaningful thing. Now, the good news is, if you have any idea how deep nitrogen narcosis starts, their deepest known case of nitrogen narcosis? Either way, or shallowest is probably more accurate, but 60 feet. Anybody know how deep I'm certifying you guys to dive to? 60 feet. Think that's a coincidence? Absolutely. And that's why we have a second class for deep diving, so that you have a better understanding of what nitrogen narcosis is, how to avoid it as well. Easy enough? All right. Oxygen toxicity. We'll just go through these really quickly. Oxygen toxicity, when you have too high a partial pressure of oxygen for too long. Signs and symptoms: visual field loss, nearsightedness, contract formation, bleeding, fibrosis, muscular twitching, seizures, respiratory, jerking, breathing, irrational coughing. Okay. Good news is you guys aren't going to get to that point because you're breathing a lower partial pressure of oxygen. Carbon dioxide or buildup of hypercapnia is more apt to happen. One of the most common things that happens in diving is people short breathe. With carbon dioxide buildup, it does cause panic. First time it happened to me, 108 foot in Ryrie, deep dive with Brett, and I could feel myself started getting panic. I'm the guy that I don't have a fear reflex. So for me to feel anxiety or panic is a very, very unusual thing. So I'm very aware of this. And I want you guys to realize diving is a very, very, very self-aware sport. Keep in check with how you feel throughout the process. So simple enough, the way to beat that was stop, breathe, take 3 big breaths. Then think. Check your air. Once you go through those things and say, "I've got plenty of air," then you can start realizing, okay, I've got plenty of air. Am I entangled? No. Can I make a direct descent to the surface? Yes. Is there a big shark going to eat me? Probably not. I'm good to go. Where that really starts showing up the most part, though, is through shallow breathing. Now, carbon dioxide buildup, hypercapnia, is when you start getting carbon dioxide buildup in your tank. Where that happens is in third world countries usually, where they have the exhaust port too close to the intake. Always smell your air. If it has a diesel smell to it, it's definitely not for you. Okay. The other thing to be aware of is carbon dioxide poisoning, and carbon dioxide inhalation can reduce your body's ability to uptake oxygen by 30%. Now, we need oxygen to breathe. You're able to uptake only 70% of the normal amount of oxygen. You're going to go through a lot more air, right? So if you get on a dive boat, try and get as far away from the diesel pump as you possibly can. Get your tank set up. Get the heck away from that diesel engine. Nobody likes to smell a diesel engine fumes anyway, right? Carbon dioxide poisoning, signs of dizziness, headache, disorientation, impairment, essential, and all the way down to coma. Visual disturbances, disease and respiratory, muscle weakness, muscle cramps, seizures, nausea, any of that, definitely bad. All right. I'm going to, let's see how far we get into this. Oh, I think we're right there. Dive planning, we're going to talk about this really quickly. Proper dive technology or terminology, dive planning, NDL, non-decompression limit, and the dive profile. So your dive starts at the beginning of the direct descent and ends at the beginning of the direct ascent. Okay. We're always going to make sure we do our deepest dive first, and we're going to plan that out. Next week, we're going to really go through some really fun dive planning. And what I'm teaching you guys to do is dive within what's called the NDL, or non-decompression limits, or the Doppler non-decompression limits. That means that you're able to do a direct ascent to the surface without the need of stopping to do a decompression stop. Okay? We'll also talk about your dive profiles of that. Now, I've already gone over that plenty of times, This is where we're going to pick up next week on Monday. If you guys could, please take the time to go through your SSI app. Make sure that you've done the homework at least through chapter 4. I'd prefer if you just have it all done. We have a week to do it. It only takes about an hour. Watch the videos, take the tests. If you have questions, you will have my email address probably by tomorrow. Don't hesitate to email me questions. Don't hesitate to text me questions. If you want, call. If I don't answer, I do return my calls. I got to go to Boise tomorrow, but I'm happy to answer everything that you have. Again, this is cute little Owen, my favorite grandson, my only grandson as well. We're going to go through a assembly check next week. We're also going to do some weight checking. We're going to do a no mask swim. This is all for Thursday, by the way. We're going to practice in the neutral dive position. We're going to go through mask drills 1 through 3 in the shallow and the deep. We're going to go through regular drills number 1 through 5 in the shallow and the deep. And we'll probably get into stationary air share, as well as oral inflation of the BC, controlled descent with a buddy, and we'll have some playtime. So expect about 3.5 hours in the pool tomorrow, or on Thursday. If that works for you guys. Easy enough?
Center?
Hmm?
Oh, wait, here.
Right here.
Okay.
Yeah. It's 92 degrees out here. So nice and easy. So that's what we're going to go through. I'll go through, before we get into the pool, I'll go through stationary air share and air sharing ascents. I don't want to get too deep in that because I want to save that for the next session. What I would like to do, though, is Monday, I'd like to do classroom and pool, and then the following Thursday, classroom and pool, if that's okay with you guys. I think that's going to be a little bit better situation for you because it gives us more sessions. I feel strongly that you guys getting the opportunity to do a pool session and then spend time thinking about it, then do a pool session and then spend time thinking about it gives you more to it. But we'll do an extended pool session on Thursday. So come with your swimming trunks and towel and some dry clothes. Your advantage. So today we covered quite a bit. What questions do you have? We went through a lot.
So I get in the States, like most things are feet and stuff, but when you go out to like the Caribbean and stuff, is most things in meters?
Most things are still in
Most
feet.
things are in feet?
Yep.
Okay.
Most things are in feet. And when you start getting into Europe, you'll start getting into bar instead of PSI, but they'll still understand feet for the most part. But you'll get a few places where they're meters, but it's not all that difficult. Easy enough. So you guys are getting certified to 20 meters or 66 feet.
Yeah,
Easy?
I did mine. Because I already did the online stuff.
Cool.
And I did it in meters, and it seems a lot simpler because
It's
it's all even numbers.
Yep, dive planning, and especially when you start getting into what I like to do, we call tech diving, gets substantially simpler in meters versus feet, and bar versus PSI, and liters versus cubic feet.
Yep.
So those in my world, that's what I live with. Go ahead and kick it off.